And the diner is wide open for business in Detroit, Michigan. Wow, I never thought I was going to ever say that, but I'm saying it. I'll let you know why we are in Detroit as we celebrate this great city. But first, this.
Here she comes again when she's dancing beneath the starry sky. She'll make you feel. Here she comes again when she's dancing beneath the starry sky. I kinda like the way she dips. She's my best friend's girl. She's my best friend's girl. But she used to be mine.
First Eddie Money at age 70, and now Rick Ocasek at age 75 has passed away, found unconscious at his townhouse in New York City by his wife of nearly three decades, Paulina Portskova. And all they're saying at this point is natural causes. That's all we know about Rick Ocasek of the Cars, a great band from Boston, Massachusetts that was such a big part of the sound of the 80s. They were perfect. They were right on time with the new wave look and sound. They were perfect for MTV in the early 80s. They made incredibly great, catchy, hooky songs that still sound so fresh and so great on the radio. And it was a shock today to hear about Rick's passing. You can hear all about that in detail, I'm sure, tomorrow on the Classic Rewind and many other channels on Sirius XM. We're again so sorry to hear about Rick Ocasek of the Cars. Thoughts that you have on Rick, by all means, you can send notes to the diner at SiriusXM.com. We're one of the few shows that is actually on live tonight. So your memories of the Cars and of their music welcomed on the note of that. Sad news. I said at the beginning of the show that the diner is open for business in Detroit, Michigan. We've done this show from Nashville. We've done it from New York, of course, and our regular home of Los Angeles. We once did it from a diner in New Jersey. And tonight, we are in the basement of the house of radio's best friend. It's, you know what, you're going to learn a lot tonight about Detroit radio, and about a guy named Art Vuolo and a guy named Robin Seymour. And yeah, like phones are ringing in the background. This is real live radio. And you know what? That's just perfectly great. We have a room full of folks. Everybody say hello. These are radio legends and radio fans from this great city, and we are here to celebrate Detroit, and that's why I am in Detroit this weekend. There was an event, a radio reunion of people who worked at some of the great halcyon radio stations in this town, radio stations like CKLW, which of course was licensed to Canada, but was a big part of Detroit top 40 culture. Incredible radio stations like W4, and Pat St. John worked at Keener 13. Now, if you lived anywhere but Detroit, these radio stations may mean nothing to you, unless you, like me, used to listen to CKLW late at night when it boomed into New Jersey. But the fact is, no matter where you grew up, you had radio stations that were part of your life, part of your DNA, the soundtrack of your life. And there were radio heroes. There were top 40 guys that were hitting the vocals and playing the hits for you and doing the contests, and that were funny and coming to sock hops and coming to your schools. And there were legends. People like Robin Seymour, who was like the Dick Clark with his own daily TV show, and so many figures that made the 60s, the 50s, 60s, and 70s so incredible in this vital and vibrant city. And so some folks organized a reunion of a lot of these disc jockeys, and this is not their first one, but this was the first one where they invited the public, so radio fans were able to come. It was a great event yesterday, and I was invited to it. No, I never worked in Detroit radio, but I love radio, and I love being around radio fanatics and radio fans and radio friends, and I made a bunch of them this weekend, and 3 of our 60s on 6 air personalities were here. Flash Phelps, who you hear every morning on 6 on 6, who did not work in Detroit. Shotgun Tom, who you hear 4 nights a week on 60s on 6, who did not work in Detroit. And Pat St. John, who cut his teeth in this town, who you hear every afternoon from 3 to 7 Eastern Time, except Wednesdays when Cousin Brucey shows up at 5 o'clock. But Pat St. John was here and is here now, along with Shotgun, and we're going to chat with them a little bit. So tonight, we're talking radio and anything else that you want to bring up in the diner at 8446-VOLUME, 844-686-5863. Jake is manning the phones back in Los Angeles while I'm here in Detroit. And, of course, emails to the diner at SiriusXM.com. One of the guys that was behind putting this reunion together, along with Art Vuolo, who we will talk about later and talk to later, because he's a phenomenal guy and really is radio's best friend. I don't know if he made up that name or if somebody gave it to him. He'll tell us that story. I don't know, but it's a good moniker for him, and he was gracious enough to let us be here at his home tonight. But the other fellow, one of the other fellows who was behind it was Michael Seltzer, who is not a radio disc jockey by trade. He's a radio fan. He was the head of a sales and marketing company, an advertising agency, basically, here in Detroit. Very, very successful at that. And is right here. Michael, welcome to the diner.
And welcome to Detroit. Welcome to a big city and a great radio town.
A great radio town. Tell us the story of how these reunions started back in, what, the 80s?
1988 was the first one, Lou. We got together, Art and myself and Millie Felch, who recently passed away, and Dick Kernan, who a lot of people know as somebody from the Specs Howard School of Broadcast Arts. And we had decided that we wanted to do this reunion idea, and we wanted to gather people from all over the country who once worked in Detroit, and it was a private party. And we had Dick Purton as our MC. He's a very well-known local DJ. And it was designed for charity, and so we raised some money for a good cause, and we had a great time, and everybody loved it. And our first guest that year in 1988 was the great Casey Kasem. And that was thrilling. And we did.
What is his connection to Detroit?
I think Casey worked in Detroit at one time. Yeah, WJBK radio way back in the... And WJLB. And, of course, he became legendary. So we did that, and then we repeated again in 1998. Soupy Sales was our guest of honor that year.
See, we all know Casey Kasem from, well, he was a famous L.A. disc jockey, but we know him as a national radio host, and we know Soupy Sales as a syndicated TV host. Was Soupy a Detroit guy?
Soupy started out in Detroit on Channel 7 here. He had a program called Lunch with Soupy. It was a half hour, I think it was a half hour live daily broadcast. And so he was legendary in Detroit. And so he was a pleasure to have back. He was elderly at the time, but he was still just as funny as can be. And so we did these, I think we did five of them total over the years. And then in the past year, this young man that we were talking about, Robin Seymour, who just turned 93.5 today. Robin and I have been friends for years along the way because of the reunions, because of my love of Detroit radio, listening to him on Keener 13, which was the big radio station back in the 60s, and watching him on television. He had that dance party show called Swingin' Time. And Swingin' Time was a great show because it's Motown, and Motown was right down the street. And so Barry Gordy would bring his talent to Swingin' Time every day.
Did a lot of people make early appearances there before they became Martha and the Vandellas or Four Tops?
The earliest appearances, Stevie Wonder was just a kid, and Smokey Robinson, who says that Robin Seymour helped launch his career. And so the Temptations, the Four Tops, Diana Ross, they were all on Swingin' Time. So it was the platform. And Robin had a great career here in Detroit. He was on the radio for 17 years and then on television for about 8. And then he left and went out to California and did fine. But Robin and I continued to be friends. We'd celebrate his birthday. I would visit him in Los Angeles when he lived there, and then he moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, and I have a home there, so we would visit in Scottsdale, celebrate his birthdays, and I kept prodding him. I said, you've got such an interesting career. You were a trailblazer. And he said, well, he's a very humble guy. I don't think anybody would care. Who would be interested? I said, I think a lot of people would be interested, and I think we should write a book. So Long story short, we got the book out in February. It's called The DJ That Launched 1,000 Hits. You can pick it up on Amazon.com.
Is it about his life or his career or both?
It starts out with him in the armed services and follows him all the way to WKMH Radio, which was the precursor to WKNR, Keener 13. He was on CKLW Radio, the Big 8. And so many of the Keener and CK DJs were together with us today and yesterday for these various reunion events. Anyway, we got the book out, and the response was great. And I said, Robin, we got to get you back to Detroit. He's 93 years old. He's living in San Antonio, Texas at this point in his life with his 2 wonderful daughters. And I said, I'd like to get you to Detroit for a weekend, maybe do some appearances. And lo and behold, we got a date at the Motown Museum. This past Thursday from 3 to 5 o'clock, there were nearly 200 people that lined up to come in there and see Robin Seymour in Studio A, signing books, telling his story, and it was just great for him. And then yesterday we had a big event here in a local venue, and today a private event at my home, and it was just fantastic. So Robin was just buoyed. It was a wonderful opportunity for him, and Motown honored him, and we all honored him, and he was so appreciative.
Well, here's the thing. He also is, at 93, particularly lucid. When he stood up to speak yesterday, I expected a very feeble, thin voice. I expected maybe somebody who forgot some of the details, somebody who just sort of said, thank you all for being here. He's got stories, and he's chatty. I was sitting with him at your house today. He's telling me one thing after another. He remembers everything.
He has an incredible memory, and he is very, very, he's very youthful, and he's very optimistic. And everybody that I've talked to since we started this, we had numbers of interviews on radio and television and in the press over the last week. And every single person called me back after the interview and says, I could not believe I was talking to a 93-year-old man.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's a great, great guy, and this was a great time.
Thank you very much for doing this, it's a labor of love, but for organizing it, for getting, you had people from pretty much every important, particularly the top 40 radio signals, and a little bit we're going to speak with JoJo, the first female traffic reporter up in a helicopter, not just in Detroit, but anywhere, right?
Yeah, and I love these people. Like I say, I was never in radio. I was in the advertising business, but I grew up listening to all of these people as a kid, and they were my idols, and I forced my way into their lives, and I am blessed to call them my friends today.
By the way, a fast side note, and also Super Max Kinkle is here from CKLW. We'll talk to Pat St. John, who really cut his teeth here, grew up here. So, what a dream for a high school kid to be on the radio while on a big, not on some 400-watt daytime sometime. That would have been good enough. But on a big top 40 station, I can't even imagine that story.
Well, Pat is one of my radio heroes and a good friend of mine, and I listened to him back on CKLW, on Keener, on Riff, here in Detroit, and then he went off to New York and became a tremendous success there. And now on Sirius XM 60s on 6 every day live. It's fantastic.
I listened to Pat, and the thing is, I can say this, it's not like saying that he's so old. He was such a wunderkind. I listened to him when I was in high school, and when he was on WPLJ in New York. I was in high school, and I used to listen to Pat St. John after school, and I loved his voice. I loved the way he just related to the music, and never dreamed that I would be working alongside of him, and he still sounds the same today. Sounds great.
He's a guy that knows how to work it. He really brings a lot of prep to every show. You can tell he's having a good time, and everybody enjoys listening to him, and he's a pleasure. And there are so many people that I grew up listening to and loving, and these radio reunions are really special because we get a chance to spend some quality time together, and these are a great veterans. The other day I took Robin over to a local deli, and I said I got a surprise guest, and he didn't know who was coming, but we were sitting there, and so along comes Dick Purton, who was a major force in Detroit radio for 40 years. Started out on Keener and went on to a number of stations, CKLW as well. The two of them locked eyeballs, and for 3 hours they talked nonstop. We couldn't get a word in edgewise. And that's the kind of stuff that happens when these guys get together, the old war stories.
And we really should say, because there are listeners listening right now who didn't grow up in Detroit the same way I didn't. This is an incredible city for so many reasons. It was an important city Industrially, it was an important city in just the growth of America socially, and just one of the great places in this nation, and it has its own culture and it has its own traditions. But we can say that about so many places, and what you did, I wish other cities would do. Celebrate the radio personalities who gave Philadelphia its flavor with at WIP, and I mean all the great signals there. And then Chicago. We could talk about Chicago radio all day long. Right. LA had its own. I mean, we all did, but it's great that you're doing it. As a matter of fact, there was a book I bought yesterday called 5,000 Ways You Know That You're From Detroit, written by a husband and wife couple.
Chris Edwards.
From Windsor, Ontario.
Yeah.
But they can't tell the difference. Windsor and Detroit are more than twin towns. And I bought it because it is such a beautifully put together book. Yeah. And I'm going to read through it with nostalgia for memories that I don't have, but seeing the pictures of these restaurants and these diners. What is the name of that restaurant again? It was on Woodward Avenue. What was it?
No, on Woodward.
On Woodward, Pat. What was the name of it? Ted's. What? Yeah. What? Pat will remember it. There's a story about a record that came out and it goes back to Woodward Avenue and a diner. Or a band that was named after. Wait a minute! It's a band that was named after a restaurant.
The Flaming Ember.
Flaming Ember.
But that's right in downtown Detroit. Yeah.
Okay, so Flaming Ember, and the group Flaming Embers got their name from the restaurant.
You'll
tell us the story when you're on mic.
Yeah. It was a steak place.
Yeah, it's a steak place.
Ember.
But I mean, there's just so much culture and so much history, and it's just great. So listen.
And the music. I mean, let's face it, Motown.
Don't even start.
I mean, that's really a big, huge part of this.
You start with Motown, but then you have Bob Seger, and then you have, listen.
And Bob Seger was on Robin Seymour's Swingin' Time. And the Rationals were on Swingin' Time. It wasn't just Motown artists. It was Mitch Ryder and Bob Seger and the Rationals, the MC5. I mean, so
the MC5. And were the Squires considered? Wasn't that Neil Young's band? Pat, you'll talk about it when you come over here. What was the name of his band?
Neil Young's?
Neil Young. And wasn't they part of the Detroit scene? Maybe not.
Not that I remember.
No. But listen, there's a billion examples. We'll listen to some of that music during the course of the show as we go into breaks and all that. But thank you for what you did, Michael.
Oh, it was a labor of love, and I did it with Art, and there were other people. Joe Shuddy McGregor was very helpful. Lee Allen, very helpful in putting this together. We did it because we loved doing it. It was called The Last Reunion. Well, that was a lie because we had another one today at my house. And there will be another one down the road. So.
By the way, the story of me, I didn't work in Detroit, and I wasn't invited to this. I don't know anything about it. Shotgun Ton calls me up, and he says, hey Lou, are you on my flight to Detroit? I said, I'm not going to Detroit. He said, you're not going. Why? I said, why would I go to Detroit? And he said, for the reunion. I said, of what? He said, the reunion, Art Vuolo's reunion. I said, I don't know anything about it. So he calls Art and says, you didn't invite Lou. And he said, well, no, I guess he didn't invite me because I guess he didn't. I don't know why he didn't invite me. But so then he calls up and says, and then he gave me the great Art Vuolo line. He said, Lou, you got to come. Why?
It's my birthday.
It's the last one. Everyone's old. Everyone's going to die. You got to come. They're all going to die. So I'm excited. I don't know even who's going to make it through this 2-hour show tonight. Everybody looks kind of weak. He said, you got to come. I said, well, okay, I'm coming. I'm going. I don't know who's it.
We people in Detroit are tough. We're tough.
You can make it until midnight Eastern time.
Yeah, I think we're going to try.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, so listen. So in a moment, we're going to, we're going to talk to JoJo not only about her career, which happened sort of by accident. She wasn't planning to be a traffic reporter in the helicopter on CKLW, but also about her late husband, Byron McGregor. You talk about a great voice. I can't imagine if he was the news guy when Pat St. John was on the air, what would have happened to my speakers, but it's incredible presence and a remarkable part of this city's history. And, of course, he had a national hit record as well. There's just so much to talk about tonight. Shotgun will jump in, even though he never worked here, but he loves this. He loves this place, and loads of other folks, including you'll all get to meet Art Vuolo, who loves radio, I believe, more than anyone on this planet, but really doesn't get to talk on radio very much. So we'll take care of that tonight as well. Jake, let's go to a break. Come back from Detroit, the Diner on Sirius XM Volume 106. And another visit with Rick Ocasek's music, Missed, now 75 years old and gone. Jake, wouldn't you agree that that is the finest moment in recorded sound?
Oh, completely would agree. It's totally grown on me since working on this show.
So we heard some cars, and we said that the rest of the night we'll use Detroit bands and artists as bumpers, but it wouldn't be a diner show without Telstar. Let's see, Tornadoes were from England, and England is not that far from Detroit. So I think
London, Ontario.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Jojo. And there's London, Ontario. So at a perfect tie-in. Now we have a tradition. We have to play Telstar in every show
Oh, okay. Let's do it.
because it's a great instrumental. We just did it.
Of course, we did it.
So, Jojo Shuddy McGregor. First of all, I mentioned earlier that you were the first female traffic reporter in America.
In North America.
In North America.
On the planet.
As far as
and
we're
look
concerned.
around the room. I'm the only female in the room,
I'm
Lou.
telling you. A big part of Detroit radio history. You started out after college. You were working at Channel 4, not on the air.
No. And I got the call to, they were going to put someone told me it was to do weather from a helicopter. And I had never done weather at that point.
Had you ever been in a helicopter?
I had never been near a helicopter. So for my first job to be on the air and in the air at the same time was just a little bit overwhelming. I had our Vietnam vet, Supermax Skinkle, say to me, how did you feel the first time you went up? I was just so over the top excited to be on the air. I didn't even think about the chopper, but my parents did.
Yeah, I'll bet they did.
And it was Byron who hired me.
And you were a kid. You were in your early 20s.
Yes, I was just moving in. And we were all kids growing up with each other. That's why you were listening to us. And if you look around the room, we're not that old.
No.
And we're growing, and our listeners grew up with us. And that's why we are the soundtrack of their lives. You and I talked about that.
It's completely true. Byron McGregor hired you.
Yes.
And then after a while, Byron McGregor began to romance you and then married you.
He did. We thought Gary Burbank, who was the morning mouth, he was our morning guy at the time. But I did work with Dick Burton at times, too. So I have, and Brother Bill Gable, all these great names that people will invariably call you afterward and get to us later. But at that point, Gary Burbank was teasing us. He used Byron and I, Byron doing the news. I also represent all the news voices that were so fantastic. Randall Carlisle, Grant Hudson, Lee Marshall, Joe Donovan, Keith Radford, all of those guys. And out of a 22-man news department at a top 40 rock and roll station, if you can believe, they had the guts with Herb McCord from WCBS in New York coming into CKLW and saying, we're going to start a traffic watch because Byron McGregor has come to me and this is what we're going to do. Now, of course, the powers that be in Canada that own the station thought, well, there's no traffic in Windsor, not knowing the power of CKLW and the emphasis on Detroit as well as Windsor, of course. But we boomed into 28 states and 6 Canadian provinces. So people thought, well, we never listened to your traffic, but we sure loved the banter. But yeah, it was Gary he kind of teased us. And then when we told him that it was happening, we were engaged, and he looked at us and he had a few choice words and he said, I can't believe I did that to you guys. And it was like, yeah, for real.
Most of the traffic obviously was Detroit based and not Windsor.
It was, but we did add Windsor for sure. And Detroit being the automotive capital at that time, I started in 1974, late 1974, and I worked through till 1978. Byron and I did get married in 1976, and I went on to TV. Byron had moved to all news radio, for those that don't know, as he put it, got a legitimate CBS news job, and he also went to TV as a news anchor, which so many of the news guys did. They were legitimate newsmen, even though a lot of people thought of them as the blood and guts, but they were a sign of their times, making the music, the top 40 music, part of the news and not having people tune out. When it got to news time, people were tuning in to listen to the news.
It was top 40 news. It was high energy. It fit the energy of the radio
Super
station.
well written, alliteration, and the cadence. And as they spit those words out, you know, grabbed them by the throats. Got them to just want to be part of it. And let's tune in. And you know what I really respect about it? Being part of the news department, I talked to Ike McKinnon, who was the chief of police in Detroit for many, many years, and he said, Byron and I had a real good rapport going, and when he would call in, they would give him the latest news, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. But he said it was always kind of interesting because most of the tipsters would first call CKLW in the 2020 newsroom and then call the police. Yes.
That's not the way it's supposed to go.
No, it wasn't supposed to be, but it was a good story. But they were really solid news guys, and they all went on to wonderful careers too. So we interfaced with all the jocks, and it was exciting. The whole thing was exciting, and we never knew what we were really part of and how legendary it was becoming. And also with the music with Rosalie Tremblay. She was just incredible.
We should mention, was the music director of the station and was responsible for launching a lot of hit records and took chances on a lot of hit records.
Including Bob Seger.
And then Bob wrote a song called Rosalie.
Yes, and she says that she didn't play it because of that, but you know what? She just had an ear for all music, whether it was Kiss, whether it was Paul Anka. The people that honored her not more than maybe 5 years ago, incredible, who sent the Guess Who. They drove all the way from Winnipeg to actually thank her for American Woman. Mm-hmm. And she took her out to lunch. They hopped in a van and came down here. So it was just a remarkable station. You know that now by being around us. It's contagious.
It is. I have so enjoyed this weekend, just being around the energy and just the fire of the fans and all of you that all still love each other. Tell me about Byron's record, The Americans. This is a record that preceded your knowing him. It was out right before you actually
Right before,
met
yes.
him. Yeah.
I just have to say, I was such a fan of your show, The Diner, before I've gotten to meet you up close and personal. But we talked one time about the Americans, and we talked once again about my dear friend Paul Peterson, who's out in California with the minor consideration and helping the young kids in the business. And so to know you were coming in, it was like, wow, I'm going to get to meet him. So here we are. But you talked about the Americans as one of the top 10 spoken word records, and I think it came in at number 3 to 5. And we talked that night, and I said to you that it was one of those songs that it was a spoken word record, so I shouldn't be calling it a song. But Armand Baladian of Westbound Records was the gentleman who actually heard Byron read the words of Gordon Sinclair, who was at the time probably 87 years old himself. He was a curmudgeon. He wrote columns for the Toronto Star, and he was speaking about everything that America had done for everyone else, and nobody was helping them out in time of need. Byron really believed in the words, and contrary to what's out there, Byron tucked those words, the editorial, the paper, in his desk drawer, pulled it out one day because he did a full, I guess it was a half-hour public affairs show, and it was 4 minutes short. He pulled that out. He took A Bridge Over Troubled Water as the background, and he read that live at the end of the public affairs program. Burned out the switchboard at CKLW, not once, in the middle of a Sunday morning. And all Byron said is, it's not a recording. Just play the public affairs show again. Once again, the switchboard was burned out. Armand Baladian was listening in Detroit, came over that Monday, and he said, Byron, we have to turn it into a record. He said, well, I'm not a recording artist. I'm a newsman. And if you've listened to the words, and we know it was very moving, and it has been there since 1974, hit the top of the charts. I'm thinking it was February, the first week in February. I did not know him. I was just amazed when I met him and realized that he was the person I had heard the piece. But it has come back very strong every time we're in need. And it can be something like Columbine, which happened to be one of the earliest shootings we all remember. And then things like the Persian Gulf crisis. And after 9/11, Byron was no longer with us. We lost him in 1995. And so that was the first time I had to be the spokesperson. And I talked to probably everyone in this room in one shape or form on the radio because they remembered the recording. And I had worked with, whether it was Supermax or Pat St. John or Dick or J.B. McCarthy here in Detroit, all of those people, they all wanted to talk about it because it was such a remarkable record. It sold 3.5 million copies. And it was the fastest selling record since Love, Love Me Do by the Beatles. And he donated all the proceeds. At the ripe old age of, he was 23 when he recorded it. He came to CK at 17. So we were young. And he donated all the proceeds, $100,000 at that time, to the American Red Cross.
It's just
Very
perfect.
proud.
That's a perfect story. Everyone continues to be so sorry for your loss. It was a sudden and awful, unexpected loss of your husband and a legend in this market for news or broadcasting.
Yeah, but his legend lives on. He had gone in for minor toe surgery, and who would have thought a hospital-induced infection would have gotten him? But you know what? That's why I'm here. Everybody lifts my spirits, and we've all lost someone. Dick Purton just lost his wife, and we kind of cling to each other in times of need. But you know what? It brings back really good memories of a wonderful market that we've been able to perform in and be part of. And to meet those fans yesterday just took us right over the top. And of course, Robin Seymour, we were there for him. But the fans, they're just, you know this as well as anybody, they are so genuine. And when you're out in their world, they're telling you their stories and you're chronologically linked to them, and they're telling you about their kids in relationship to the year you got married. They had their firstborn. And it's like, really? You know, but they really follow. And it's a very sincere market too, in terms of good people and just a good business.
Jojo Shuddy McGregor still carrying on Byron's name and holding his story up high, and you are still very much, obviously, a part of this family of broadcasters. Thanks for visiting with us.
Thanks for coming to town. It's been a thrill. It really is.
Absolutely. It was a great idea. It was Art's idea.
I know. You know Art. He can do it just about anything.
I know. You mentioned Dick Purton. Now let's get Dick Purton over here, folks. If you're just tuning in, the diner is in Detroit tonight. We're here because of a radio reunion that was put together of great radio talents from the wonderful radio stations that dot the dial here in the Motor City, and so I was invited to it and said, "Hey, let's sit and talk." So, Dick, you want to come over and chat with me a little bit? Dick Purton, a legend, a legend here in the Motor City.
That means old synonym. Hi, Lou.
How are you? Nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you. We've never met, I believe.
We have never met, but currently your legend looms large, and of course I know your name, and I've heard tapes of you over the years, but we've never met. Oh yeah, well listen, that's how we all got to listen to radio from around the country, was air checks. We used to call them.
But you never called me to work with you or for you.
No, I never tried to hire you. Well, I was not in a position to hire you. What brought you to? Were you born and raised, or how did you come to Detroit?
Buffalo.
Buffalo is your path, and
Guy King in Buffalo. We used to have Jack the Bellboy here, and Buffalo had Guy King. There were 5 of us. Frank Ward, do you know the name?
No, yeah, but let's explain that to listeners. These are names that the radio station would own, and they'd bring different people in and have them use that name.
Exactly right, yep.
So you were Guy King.
I was the 4th Guy King, yeah. There was Bruce Bradley, Tom Clay. I'm not sure that was in that order. I think it was. Frank Ward, who was the best of all, I thought. And then I followed that, and then got in Charlie Griggs.
Did the listeners notice that the voice was changing?
I have no idea, but I suspect they did. Yeah.
So they caught on. But you eventually got to use your own name. Tell me about your journey to Detroit.
Well, Syracuse, New York, where I went to school, and I was Paul Purton there. I'm not sure. I was Paul Purton in some cities, and I was Dick Purton in others, because my name is Paul Richard Purton, and there were a couple of guys named Dick ahead of me, and so they didn't want.
Yeah, but I mean, you're getting hired in Detroit.
What is
getting
that?
hired in Detroit for the first time. Which station was that?
Keener. That was Keener 13. Yeah.
WKNR. Was it top 40 at that point?
That was top 40. In fact, I got there late, a year and a half after they were on the air, so I didn't take any credit for any big ratings. But when I joined them, I had been mornings at WSAI in Cincinnati, and then I came up to Keener, and they offered me 3 to 7 to replace Gary Stevens. You know, Gary went to New York.
WMCA.
Great talent, great talent. From Buffalo, too, as a matter of fact. And then, anyway, I did 10 to 1 for 2 months, and they put me in mornings. So
Were you at Keener the same time as Pat St. John?
I was not. No, I think Pat was about 5 years after me. I think we were talking yesterday about that. Yeah, yeah.
So, Pat, you used to listen to Dick Burton.
Absolutely.
And now I listen to him.
Tell me about what your show was like, how you created a sense of community, what you did that was unique. What made Dick Burton's show different than the others in Detroit?
Well, the first answer to that, I would say, is your lookalike, Lou. Do you see a guy standing right there?
Yes.
That is Big Al Muscovito. Sort of like. That was his name on the air. What did we name you after? The mayor of New York?
D'Amato.
Yeah, D'Amato. Wasn't it?
D'Amato?
Yeah, something like that. Alphonse D'Amato. I think that's what it was, yeah. So he used that voice as a character on the show. But he worked on the show. My daughter Jackie worked on the show. She was in the original Detroit cast of Second City. Very, very funny ad-lib, type stuff. That's tough to do. And a whole bunch of very good other people that worked on the show. Doc Andrews has passed on. Doc was a dwarf, little person. And he was 4 foot whatever with this big, deep voice, beautiful voice. And he died of colon cancer, about in 2004. Gene Taylor before that, another brilliant, brilliant guy.
It sounds like almost like what we came to call the morning zoo. It sounds like there were a lot of personalities and a lot of different voices.
Exactly. We had that before they called it the zoo, as far as I know. But that's what it was,
Sure
really.
did, yeah. So there was a collection of people. There was a lot of
Yes. Right.
So it wasn't just one guy spinning records.
Listen, I could hardly do my own voice, let alone the voices these guys were all doing. Yeah, they're great characters, and it just worked for some reason for a lot of years.
You worked at 5 or 6 stations in Detroit?
Yeah, 5 or 6 is right. Yeah, exactly. There was a call letter change in one of those there. But anyway, that basically was 5 stations.
Moving around was because people wanted to pay you more money, you became disenchanted with the station you were on, or all of the above?
A little bit of above, yes. Yeah, all of that. Yeah, for sure.
So listeners would follow you, and weren't there non-compete agreements that would keep you from going from signal to signal?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was supposed to go to WNBC in New York to do the morning show. And I didn't sign a contract. Probably we shook hands on the whole deal. And I came back and I told the guys at XYZ, where I was at the time, and they said, you can't go. And I said, yeah, but it's out of town. And they said, no, you can't go. You can't cross towns. Doesn't matter what it is. You have a contract. Yeah.
Wow.
So NBC threatened to sue ABC for messing the deal up because ABC owned WXYZ. And so we got out of it because we didn't want to, get sued or anything.
They didn't want you going up against their flagship WABC.
I guess.
Right.
I guess that's the case.
That would make the most sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that early 70s? Because that when
That
Don
was
Imus.
about 1970. Yeah.
So it was
yeah.
around when Don Imus came in from WGAR in Cleveland.
Imus got the job when I was forced to not take it.
Wow.
Yeah,
he
went out of
had
Cleveland at that
you to
point.
thank
He's done it on the air. I believe he's thanked me a few times.
for Dick Burton not being able to leave Detroit.
Yeah.
It's great to meet you, and I'm glad for this weekend because I saw you being celebrated yesterday. A lot of people gathering around to shake your hand or take pictures with you.
Well, that's because I was handing money out. So
It's because you're a big part of people's lives, and they woke up to you, and it's great.
It was a great 45 years are on the air. Yeah, it was.
How many years?
45.
Wow.
Yeah.
We take a break, we come back, and we speak with more folks here in Detroit, and your calls at 844-6-volume. Your emails, please, to the diner at SiriusXM.com.
Felt like number one.
At Hitsville, USA. We're in Detroit, Michigan. I'm Lou Simon on SiriusXM Volume 106. We're in the diner, and we're here in Detroit because this weekend there was a great celebration, a radio reunion of some of the great disc jockeys, newscasters, traffic reporters, and the folks that made Detroit Radio Come Alive. Robin Seymour, who's 93 years old, was honored and celebrated. He, of course, had his own daily dance TV show, a la Bandstand. He was a disc jockey in the 50s and the 60s. And so many other great legends are here as well, including our very own 60s on 6 host, who you can hear at 3 in the afternoon Eastern, noon Pacific, Pat St. John. Welcome.
It is a thrill to be on your show. It's about time.
Wow. I know you've never been on the diner.
I'm telling you, but I listen, and I must say, before we talk about this, and your regular listeners will know, I want to tell you, you may not like this, but it's Boogaloo down Broadway.
I don't think so.
Yeah, well, I just want to settle that completely. And the microphone is mine now, so just never mind. We go on to another subject.
We've played that thing over and over, and we don't know. Unfortunately, the fantastic Johnny C. no longer with us.
Yeah. Well, okay. Anyway,
We didn't know that.
back to the program.
Pat, you were your story, I think, is so particularly fascinating because you were a teenager still in high school. Were you a junior?
Senior? No, I was a senior when the last half of my senior year I got involved with the 10-watt school station.
Okay, but you're still in school when you get onto a top 40 station that the kids can listen to, right?
No, not really. I got as soon as I got out of high school, I got hired at W4 here, WWWW. I had to learn how to say W, and but that was just a beautiful music channel, and it was all automated.
So you start doing top 40 at Keener, WKNR.
No, I was making tapes. I was in the middle of the night working. That's where you start on the overnight show, and I would set up the tapes and stuff, and then I'd have like 4 hours in the middle of the night. I used to bring in my 45s, and I was making demo reels, audition tapes, sending them to CK.
CKLW.
And they kept saying, "Oh, we have nothing now." They were very polite. "We have nothing now," and I'd send another tape, and it was. Geez, it was 9 months later, I'm so sorry, that I got a call from the program director. And he called me down and had an interview with Dick Smythe, the newsman. And he said, "Yeah, we want to hire you." And I just turned 18. They hired me for 3 DJ shows a week. 2 days a week, I drove around in the CK Camaro getting news actualities. And 1 day a week, I actually worked for Byron McGregor, and I did a news shift. And I really wanted to be a disc jockey, but it was fun, and I got a ton of experience, and even part-time booth announcing on Channel 9.
Wow. Did you, now when you were out in the Camaro, I mean, did you run into any, I thought that you were still in high school, but still, you're 18,
Right.
and you're only a year or so out of high school. Did you
No
run
real
into,
professional experience at all as
did
being
you
a
run
disc
into a
jockey.
bunch of your high school friends when you were driving the Camaro?
Oh, I would drive around. Yeah, I would drive around to the schools and stuff, and it was totally loaded with all the CKLW. I mean, it was the CK Camaro. Come on, but I got to go out to Detroit Metro and get a soundbite or two from Hubert Humphrey and stuff like that. So I just gained a ton of experience there.
Did you get to go to any, like Cobo Hall or any of the big concerts at the time?
Oh, yeah. Somebody asked the other day on Facebook, your most memorable experience of Cobo Hall, because they changed the name. It's still there, but they just changed the name. And I said, well, I guess I was 19. I was at CK, and I introduced at Cobo Hall Cat Mother and the All Night Newsboys. And I introduced them on stage. Then I'm backstage just to be handy in case they needed me to introduce the main act, Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix, who produced the Cat Mother record.
That's right, absolutely right. So I'm standing backstage. I'm as close to Jimi Hendrix as you are, and he's standing there, and he's like fiddling with the guitar and getting it all straight, and I'm standing there, and I'm frozen. People said, "Did you talk to him at all?" I was frozen. It was just, so that's the most memorable of Cobo Hall for me, standing 3 feet from Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
They didn't need me to say,
Ladies and gentlemen, yeah.
Jimi Hendrix.
No, but that's a cool concert memory. You were right in the thick of it. That had to be 1969.
That's right.
So, I mean, you're right in the thick of one of the great rock and roll eras. Now, did you see Seeger early on?
Oh, yes, very early. 6, 7, with songs that are local hits like East Side Story. This is before Ramblin'.
This is The Herd?
Bob Seger and the Last Herd, yeah. And, had a lot of local hits here. he was signed to Cameo Parkway, so those early ones came out on Cameo Parkway. But yeah, in fact, I introduced a Bob Seger concert at a junior high school here, and his dressing room was the boys' locker room, and that's where I first met Bob. So that's still a pretty good memory in my mind, even though it was not Cobo Hall, but it was Bob Seger.
Did you know that Art Vuolo, who's hosting us tonight, we're in his basement,
Yeah.
radio's best friend,
Yeah.
went to high school with Bob Seger?
In Ann Arbor, yeah, right.
He actually has a yearbook from the year that Bob Seger graduated with Bob Seger's, high school picture.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and me and Shotgun took it, and we're putting it up on eBay. And the thing is, when Art wasn't paying attention, that thing's already up to $50. So
There you go. Beautiful.
he said he had gym class with Bob Seger.
Isn't that something? Oh man. Well, that's part of it. Detroit was always such a great radio town. It was just a dial where you could go from Keener to CK or WXYZ, and it was just a great radio town. And we had so many more Motown releases locally, since it was Motown. If there were national, if the Temptations had a couple of hits, nationally in Detroit, it would be like twice that much, twice as many. But we had Bob Seger, and we had like the Rationals were mentioned earlier, and so many local groups like that.
Hey,
it was
Pat,
just fantastic.
You know who sat in front of me in English class?
Who was that?
Dion Jackson. Remember his
Ooh,
one big
love
hit?
makes the world go round. Yeah.
Art had a star-studded,
Yeah.
very distracting.
Anyway, it's been a thrill to be a part of Detroit radio, and growing up with these legends. Dick Purton, I mean, on the radio, you couldn't stop listening. Not only because he was so funny, but he was so real and friendly and down to earth, and he's humble to this day, and he's really like the king of Detroit radio. Wow. I mean, because he's done it all, and he's been a part of these people's lives. And it was like, and when I heard him back in the real early days at Keener, and I've told him this story, and he's had an answer for it, I just said, here he was, this is like 63 or whatever, and he's on the air, and he's cueing the record on the air, and he goes, ew. And it was just hilarious, because he was just, and he says that's because I didn't know any better. He knew what he was doing, and he was just making crazy, hilarious radio that just sucked you in. And he's just still, but
Never told me this before, Pat. This is all new to me.
toppermost of the poppermost, man. See, he's,
Was it tough to leave Detroit for you? You went to New York, and it was a big deal.
Well, I didn't really want to, because this was my hometown. So, I had been like, five years in Detroit, and really didn't want to, but I got this offer from New York, which I turned down, actually, for the first time. But then it was like, well, it was the number one market.
You had to.
And
You had to.
I had to, to go to the number one market and give it a try in New York. And that lasted 42 years. So it was, that was probably a good move. And then a great move. I'll be 21 years on Sirius XM in October.
Amazing. Pat St. John, ladies and gentlemen, we go to break. We come back with Hour 2 and talk to Super Max from CKLW. We're in Detroit on Sirius XM Volume 106. Stick around.
Thank you.
We're in the diner on Sirius XM Volume 106. We are in the basement of Art Vuolo's house. Now, anybody who knows anybody in radio knows Art, radio's best friend. We'll talk to him before this hour is up. I'm Lou Simon on Sirius XM Volume Channel 106. I'm here because there was a Detroit radio reunion this weekend. Art was very instrumental, along with some other folks who pulled together, gosh, a lot of people from a lot of stations. Detroit, one of the great radio towns. I wish every city would have a radio reunion and celebrate all the great disc jockeys that people grew up with in those particular places, be it Dallas or Pittsburgh. Everyone had their legends. Certainly, Detroit had its share of them, including Super Max Kinkle from CKLW, the Big 8. Hello, Max. Shaking your head, but you don't want to be called a radio legend, but you are.
Well, I appreciate that, but truth be known, I hated that name, Supermax, you know. Paul Drew laid that on me, and, well, Bill Hennis said he was responsible for it, but when they played that jingle, they had the jingle and everything cut, and I go into the office, and he said, come on in, we'll, talk and have lunch. And he plays the jingle. I said, no way, Jose, I'm not doing that.
Did you get the name from the hairdryer, Supermax?
No, actually, the hairdryer got it from me when I was on it.
Got it from you. There you go. You should have had a piece of that.
Yeah, well, the big, these Supermax prisons and everything else, they're all going to hear from me and my attorneys.
Hey, listen, it was whether you liked it or not to begin with, you certainly grew into it, and you certainly, maximized it, if you will, super maximized it. And it's a great radio name. I used to listen to you in New Jersey because CKLW out of Windsor, Ontario, licensed to Windsor, had an incredible signal and used to boom into where I lived. And I used to listen to you and say, my God, this guy, and I pictured this big, you were a great looking guy, but you didn't look necessarily like you sounded. I pictured this big, gigantic man, you know what I mean? Kind of like Shotgun Thomas, real tall and just big and present. And you were a slight, good looking fella. with a big voice.
Don Imus one time, my brother heard this, and Imus was reportedly said, I heard this brother on the Big 8 CKLW the other night, and he must be about 7 feet tall, and he's got and he just gets back on these records, and he intros Mitch Wright and the Detroit Wheels and lets it. All of a sudden, I'm even when I in Washington when I was at NBC, they turned around and I made a mistake saying that I was. Actually, I read a PSA quick thing about Thursday becoming Vietnam Veterans Day. And I said, well, that's a bunch of horse hung. And the phones went like crazy and everything else. And they go, who's this guy to talk like that? And then when I turned around and said, hey, I was in combat for a year. Why can't I say it,
So all of a sudden you went from being a top 40 jock to being, an honest commentator on things.
Yeah, I appreciate, yeah, we use that vernacular. We were all jocks, but I don't think it's true, because radio is the original mass medium of show business, and all these guys are personalities. They're show people, and look, I'm getting a pension from the two show business unions, AFTRA, American Federation of Television and Radio, and SAG, Screen Actors Guild, and. Why do you think they named that place Radio City Music Hall? Because that's where the greats started.
That's right. Great radio broadcast. Tell us what you're doing now, Max. What are you up to?
Well, believe it or not, like you said, Lou, that named, even when I was at CBS for all those years, people would call in and say Supermax, I said I couldn't get away from this name, so I named the radio station that I own supermaxradio.com. And being a combat veteran and having the issues like a lot of veterans, I was injured over there. And throughout my career, I had a lot of times where, it acted up. I had a serious head injury and affected my spine. And in the latter years now, it's, coming to light and causing me problems. But one thing I have done, I created supermaxradio.com for all these kids that are in there now. They're kids compared to what I am. And I know what it feels like to be 20 years old in combat. And the public doesn't realize about 8 months ago, they made a statement, the VA, the Veterans Administration, that 22, on average, 22 either combatants in harm's way now, as well as the combat veterans that are home and not going back into, but they're seriously still in the advanced stages of post-traumatic stress disorder, and they want to eat their gun. That's a military term for committing suicide. The number per day is 22. At the end of a month, that's 600. Do you have to do the math anymore? I mean, this is catastrophic. So we have only 3 stops an hour, 20 20 after the hour, 20 minutes through the hour, and 10 minutes to the hour. We stop for 30 seconds with a message from messages of hope and help. People like Gene Hackman, by the way, United States Marine Corps Gene Hackman. John Fogerty from Creedence Clearwater Revival. He was in the Army when I was there in the Tet Offensive of '68. We got one coming from Oliver Stone, Willie Nelson, Susan Sarandon, Anne Margaret. And plus, we have scattered actual people that were contemplating suicide and no longer are doing that. They've gotten help and they have got productive lives now. I want to see that number from going from 22 down to as low as I can get it. I'd like to see it get down to 0, but I'm a practical individual. I know that may not happen, but I pray to God that, we got the strength and the insight to make it happen. And only the American public can do that.
Tell us the site again. And when people get there, aside from the 3 breaks an hour where you offer help and hope, what else do they hear? Music?
Well, yeah, there's music right around the clock, 24 hours, 7 days a week.
60s music?
No, everything. I mean, listen, there's still people coming out with music here and there, even in this year, but you got to find it. You got to listen for it. And we have about 7,000 songs in the catalog now.
Oh, boy.
And we don't have repetition like they have, 500 or 600 records, and they beat them to hell,
I got it. And so tell us again, the supermaxradio.com.
Yeah, it's the guy I was, supermaxradio.com. As simple as that. You got Wi-Fi, you got Bluetooth, the radio, all these great legends that are in here, they know it was terrestrial radio that started it all, but it's going to be in the way, it's here now. It's in the cars. I was coming over with Steve Hunter, he has, it's in the cars, the internet, the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, it's all happening. Sirius XM is that way.
Yes. Well, listen, I thank you on behalf of all of us for 2 things. I thank you for your bravery and the sacrifices you made for our freedom. I also thank you for kicking ass on CKLW and making some really, really great radio happen, even with the name Supermax. Great stuff. Everybody, Supermax Capo. Yeah! We love you. Shotgun Tom is on 60s on 6 on Sirius XM weeknights, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, because Cousin Bruce is on Wednesday. And he is, to me, the disc jockey's disc jockey. He makes radio sound better, and he makes me feel like he is in the car with me. And he did not work in Detroit, but he's a legend in San Diego, a legend in Los Angeles, and now a legend nationwide on Sirius XM. And he's here because, as he was told, everyone here is going to die tonight, I think.
That's what I was told by Art Vuolo. And
told me. I got so scared. I called Delta right away. I said, I don't care how much it costs. I need a ticket.
Well, that's why I called you, baby. I said, hey, man, are you getting what flight are you getting?
We got to go. We have to be there. But I'm glad that you're here. You're a king of radio, and we're so proud to have you on Sirius XM as part of our family.
Fit in, man.
I know you're just trying to figure out what to do. The record's ending. You just open the mic and go.
That's it, man. I just do the deal. Hey, can Supermax do one thing for me before he leaves?
Yeah.
There you go. It's the Big 8, baby. Can you do that?
You mean CKLW all night?
The Big 8, baby. Go ahead.
The Big 8!
I'm sorry, I had to do that, man. I love that, man. Hey, by the way, the reunion was sensational. We had the Reflections sang just like Romeo and Juliet. Now, are the Reflections from Detroit?
Absolutely from Detroit.
Why weren't they mentioned before?
Why weren't they mentioned?
Well, you mentioned all the other guys, but Reflections was left out.
Well, no, we're playing. We just played Marv Johnson. If we have time, you'll hear the Reflections.
But by the way, they were in the hall. And they sang beautifully. As you know, you were there.
It sounded great.
The harmony was fantastic. They played in that hall, which, let's face it, for a group like that, it wasn't the perfect situation. And when you have some group of that quality come off with greatness, I think that was sensational.
Well, I'll say something else about the Reflections. A lot of groups of that ilk don't have, they do their best to sound, great. But as they start to age, some of them don't still sound so good. I know that because I've gone to see some of the groups and some of the others. These guys sound really good.
They really did.
And that one fella, and I think his name was John, but I could be wrong, he sang To Be Loved.
Oh.
There was what was his name?
Joey.
Joey. There was not. I mean, you could hear a pin drop in that room. People were devastated. My mouth was open. I was saying, "Holy!" I went up to him in the hall afterward and said, "What did you just do?" So yeah, the Reflections. If you ever have a chance to go see them, folks, they're still working. They're still great, and of course they do that great single, Just Like Romeo, which still sounds great.
Which we play
hear
on the 60s on 6 all the
I hear
time.
you play it, and it always, as soon as I hear it, I turn it right up. Which was actually recorded at a secondary studio that Barry Gordy wanted to stop the competition, so he bought it. Isn't that true, Pat St. John? He bought Golden World because he didn't like the fact that his guys, the Funk Brothers, were going out and moonlighting over there. So he bought the place and turned it into a Motown studio. I believe that's the story. I'm sure that story is told correctly in the Motown Museum or over at Hitsville, where there are experts in this town about that incredible music. But you didn't work in this market, but you were well aware of these Detroit legends.
Oh, yeah. You can see KLW was one of my favorite radio stations. The fact that it was a boss radio station, it used the Johnny Man jingles, which I use on my show. Right. Shotgun Tom Kelly, 60s on 6. And then, of course, the big 8 was CKLW, the Motor City. Oh, I get goosebumps every time.
And as soon as they played that, the jock was right there at the beginning of the record.
Motor Cities.
Oh, the Motor City.
Oh, it's plural? It's Motor Cities?
I always was plural. Motor Cities. Windsor and Detroit were they made cars in Windsor like crazy.
I never heard the S. I didn't either. I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was Motor City. No? Well, anyway, all I know is the jock was right there. As soon as that jingle was over, boom, the guy was right there.
Well,
How did the newscast end? Was it so-and-so, CKLW 2020 News? Now, did they say now? How'd they get out of the news? And now, Supermax, CKLW music, bam.
Like more music.
Well, they're newsmen, and JoJo mentioned Lee Marshall, one of the newsmen, who, by the way, later became the voice of Tony the Tiger.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think CKLW's news team was very popular because they were entertaining. Now, they told the news, if it bleeds, it leads. And they described what's...
If it bleeds, it leads.
What did I say?
If it leads,
Okay, if it bleeds, it leads. Okay, thank you, Art.
There you are.
But anyway...
Told you we'd get Art on the air.
yeah, I know.
I was there.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Art Vuolo.
Now, wait a minute. But anyway, the CKLW, everything about CKLW, from the jocks to the newsmen, was just terrific. I mean, it was entertaining. And I got to tell you something. We had 450 people at that reunion yesterday, and many of them were coming up to Pat St. John, Flash Phelps, and myself, and they were saying, we heard you guys talking about this reunion, and this is why we're here.
Love that.
They came from miles around. You know, there were some dancers who were dancing with the Reflections.
Yeah.
They came up to me in the shotgun. We heard your Friday night show, and we were listening on the way in, and it was so wonderful because we were on our way here, and you just made our drive from Florida wonderful. Isn't that great?
It's great that Top 40 Radio is still alive in that way and playing that music. You and I both grew up, loving CK, and people who lived here they had so much more because they could jump around, as Pat said, from station to station looking for their favorite song. But the jocks really became family, and they became part of the fabric and almost part of the music, because you could tell that they loved it as much, and the music was great. And this town played a lot of records that other places never did because they were local artists. By the way, I looked up the Squires, and I was correct. That was Neil Young's band, but they never got near Detroit. They just worked up in Canada. I don't know where I got the Detroit part, but, we don't like to look things up on this show except when we can't remember things. And so we always say it's better to guess and be wrong than to look it up to be right. But in this case, I looked it up, and we're clean on the Neil Young thing.
Dick Burton was just incredible. I mean, I when I was working at K-Earth 101 in Los Angeles, came out here, had a chance to be on with Burton and his people in the morning, and it was just sensational. And you know what I really enjoyed yesterday at the reunion? I'm a former children's television host. I did children's television for 17 years in San Diego, and I got to meet Bozo the Clown, Art Servy, and we were talking about, and there's not very many of us children's show hosts that have done television, but he was Bozo the Clown. And to get on his show, he told me yesterday, you had to wait 5 years for a ticket to be on Channel 9 with Bozo the Clown. It was great.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a break, shotgun, and then we're gonna come back and chat more. We're gonna talk with a guy named Ray King, who actually, who still, there are people who love radio so much. They'll do it from their house. They'll do it from their garage. They will set up an internet radio station, just keeping this legacy going, because I got news for you. There's a generation right now that really they don't completely have this same vibe, the same relationship with radio. They ingest music in a very different kind of a way. So we are almost like the end of an era. We'll talk to Ray about what he's doing. Well, we'll meet a guy named Kevin O'Neill.
Oh, God. Oh, wait till you hear him do his Casey Kasem impression.
Casey Kasem impression.
Oh, God, that's great.
One thing I'd like to set the record straight. Bob, if you're listening, we did 3 interviews at Kobo. And
Bob Seger.
Yeah, Bob Seger. And I said to you, one day you're going to be an institution, and people are going to remember you. So every time Like a Rock plays and you cash them checks, I told you so.
You got it right.
Your system when he first heard that record on CK.
He what now?
He was the Bob Seger system.
Right, Rambling
He
Gambling
off
Man.
the side of the road, and they were all in a van, and he jumped up and down, and he said, "Well, I can't believe she put on our record." He still is a great guy.
I remember hearing Rambling Gambling Man for the first time on CKLW. That's where I heard that record, and I went out and tried to buy it and couldn't find it. Eventually I did. But, CK was breaking music. Rosalie Trombley was finding hits and taking risks with records. And it was great. Detroit, a great radio town, being celebrated this weekend with a Detroit radio reunion. We are live from the Motor City in Art Vuolo's house with a whole room full of radio folks. We'll be right back in the diner at Sirius XM Volume. The Reflections.
Something I wanna do, just like Romeo and Juliet.
I do believe, if my memory serves me correctly, that was the first Motown record I ever heard. Please, Mr. Postman. It was around Christmas time, I think, of 1961. And I remember loving it, not knowing it was Motown or part of any kind of a new upcoming tradition. But I loved that single, and that was my introduction to Motown music, Marvelettes, on Sirius XM. We're on Volume 106. If you haven't heard that Rick Ocasek passed away, it did happen. He was found unconscious at his town home in New York by his wife, Paulina, wife of many years. He was 75 years old. And all they're saying right now is natural causes. So I guess we'll learn more, if we're going to learn more, over time. But terrible right on the heels of the loss of Eddie Money just a few days ago. And so we're very, very sorry to hear about that. The Cars, such a great Boston band. And, of course, they're called The Cars, and we're in Detroit, coincidentally, the home of the American automobile industry. But anyway, Rick Ocasek gone at age 75. If you listen to a classic Rewind tomorrow, and I'm sure many other channels, maybe even Deep Tracks, will get deeper into their stuff over the next few days. You will hear tributes, and you'll hear lots more. We are in Detroit because the radio reunion happened this weekend, honoring Robin Seymour, who is a radio legend, 93 years old, and a big part of growing up in Detroit. But growing up in Detroit, if you were a radio fan, a rock and roll fan, you had a multitude of radio stations to choose from, where some great disc jockeys passed through. Some came from other cities. Some were born and raised here. Some stayed a long time. Others left on to other cities. This was, I think, the 5th largest radio market in the nation. So if you were going to move up, you didn't have too many places to go. But the fact is, great radio happened here. I was invited to this reunion and said, you know what, I'll stick around and we'll do the diner. First time we're really doing it, other than our TikTok diner show in New Jersey. First time we're doing it not in a Sirius XM studio. And I kind of like it. We are in the basement of radio's best friend, Art Vuolo, who invited us here. Everybody loves Art, and it's a room full of radio legends that are staying up late with us on a Sunday night. And then there are some people who aren't necessarily radio legends, but they are radio mega fans who have developed their own way of keeping the spirit of it alive by creating radio stations and doing them from their house and having fun with it. Ray King is one of those guys, and he calls his Wixie1260online.com. Hey, Ray, how are you?
Lou, thanks for having me. I'm great. I want to tell you, Shotgun Tom Kelly, Super Max Kinkle, tough acts to follow. But I really appreciate your getting me on here.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, listen, what you do is labor of love. It's passion.
Absolutely.
Tell us exactly what you do.
What I do right now is I have 2 radio gigs. I'm part of Wixie 1260 Online, which is the recreation of Cleveland's Wixie 1260, which was a huge AM station between 65 and 76, and that's on the internet only. I'm also doing a show on John Carroll University's FM station, which now has been on the air 50 years, WJCU.
We should say your show hasn't been on 50 years, but the radio station.
Well, actually, the show's been on 16, which is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
The show's called Retro Radio. It's on Saturday afternoons from 3 to 5, and we play music from 1963 through 73 from 4 stations, CKLW, and we use their jingles, Wixie 1260 with their jingles, KYW with their jingles, and WHK with their jingles. And people love it.
And you even have voices on the on your Wixie 1260 online who are actual radio professionals.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have short air checks, recordings of the original Wixie jocks, which we call Wixie Classics, that we play every now and then. And you can hear what the original Wixie sound. Jack Armstrong, Billy Bass, Larry Morrow, Chuck Dunaway, they were all amazing.
I have to assume you're from Cleveland.
Yes, I am. Yes.
And so how did you even get the WIXY jingles, and how did you get to use their name?
Well, I'm a jingle collector and an oldies collector, and you can download the Wixie jingles from anywhere, and I've got all the Wixie jingles, most of the CK jingles, and everything else. And a friend of mine asked me in 2011, I want to put on a internet radio station, a tribute to Wixie 1260. Could you help me with it? He's a computer guy. I'm a radio geek, so he knows how to wire the station up, put it on the air, and I supplied him with all the music, all the jingles, all the air checks, and it just meshed. It just worked. And we've been on the air since 2011. We have about 20 volunteers. We do remotes around Cleveland in the summer, and we're amazing. I mean, we really sound like Wixie. We have jocks on 7 days a week. Overnights it's an automation.
Do you get emails from people who grew up in Cleveland who hear it and say, "Oh my God, this sounds just like what I grew up with"?
All the time. They love it. They love it.
You're providing a public service.
Yeah, we are. And we actually take requests via email and our studio line.
Isn't that great? I mean, it is so exciting to me, people like you, and I mean that because you're so passionate about it. Now, we're sitting here, we're going to talk to Art Vuolo in just a bit. We're sitting here in the basement. Every wall here is covered with, video 8s, laser discs, formats that were the Edsel of digital whatever. Betamax and everything. And he's got, we're going to talk to Art about what he's done, which is so remarkable, but he and you are really, really inspirational because you're not doing this for riches, you're not doing it for fame, you're doing it for pure pleasure and to bring pleasure and, again, rekindle that marvelous flame of the radio that we grew up with.
Right. And Art and I actually met back in 1978 when Betamax was just beginning. We were sending tapes back and forth through the mail before video stores, before downloading and the internet, and that's how we became very close friends. We both have a ton of Betamax tapes and the machines to play them on.
What was on those tapes you were sending back and forth?
No, don't tell me.
Well, I'm assuming it was radio related.
But no, it was actually TV shows, movies you tape off cable that you couldn't get where you lived. We swapped with people all over the country. It was a huge thing for about 10 years.
Really?
Yes.
You were
yes.
share wearing TV shows
by U.S. mail.
Wow.
We used to brag our long distance bills were bigger than our mortgage payments.
So we're going to tell listeners again, it's WIXY, Wixie1260online.com. If you grew up in Cleveland, listening to Wixie, you can still do that.
Absolutely. And we have our own mobile app. You can download the app, iPhone and Android, and it works great. We sound great. Our sound quality is fantastic.
It's the second time you said we sound great, and I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're proud of it.
Of course. And we also run Chicken Man.
Oh, yeah. How'd you get those?
We got them. We bought them.
We bought them. That's great. So now we know that Reagan bought Chicken Man. So Kevin, that means you can't have him unless you pay him a license fee. That's the next thing. He's going to charge you for Chicken Man.
I got to tell you, having grown up I grew up in Cleveland. I've been in Detroit radio since 1980, but I grew up in the heyday of Wixie in Cleveland, and he and his co-workers have recreated that station like you cannot believe. It is so good. Wixie at the time was playing 60 songs. That was their hit list, their tune decks, and they actually go into a lot of the other songs you don't hear all that often.
The ones that Wixie actually really played.
It's phenomenal.
If somebody did that, I mean, Cousin Brucey hates when I say this, but if somebody could recreate WMCA, because see, growing up where I did in New Jersey, WABC was the big powerhouse, and it sounded great, and they had best disc jockeys, and it was just, great. But they had a pretty short playlist. It was pretty safe. They were a little late on records, and they play their what they play are probably 30 records or something like that. WMCA at 570, which had a much weaker signal and didn't pay the disc jockeys as much and didn't do the big contests and all that, had like a 50 or 60 song playlist. They were playing records that, you'd hear them, you go to the record store, and there's no way you were going to find them. You had to special order them or just never get them and then find them, 30 years later. You'd buy one online, you'd find some They were deep. And so I listened to WMCA a lot. And if somebody recreated that with the good guy jingles and all that kind of thing, that would be just, killer. So it's very nostalgic. Now, so you came from Cleveland. You wound up here in Detroit.
Yes, I came here in 1980 from Houston, actually. Cleveland radio, WGAR. I worked there. I did the overnight show for 2.5 years.
What period of time was that?
I was there 76, 77, and 78.
So after Don Imus.
Yes.
We're going to keep talking about Don Imus.
Yeah, Don had left, and John Lanigan was doing the morning show then. And I went to Houston in 78 and was lucky enough to come to Detroit in 1980. And I remember driving up I-75, and I was nervous. I knew what a heritage market Detroit radio was. And I thought to myself, if I could just last for a couple of years, and the two goals I had were to meet Tom Shannon, one of my all-time favorite disc jockeys, and to meet Dick Purton. I thought if I could just meet those two guys, I would be the happiest guy on earth. And I've been very lucky. I've been in and out of work a number of times in the Detroit market, but have managed to survive since 1980 and ended up being a part of Purton's People for 6 years.
Wow.
And it was a dream come true. In addition to doing my own show on the station, I would come in early and do things with Purton's People.
And you met Tom Shannon.
I sure did.
Who unfortunately was not with us yesterday.
Yes,
but
he was supposed to be.
Yeah. Tom Shannon, if I now make sure I got the right guy, you guys will all correct me, was it Buffalo?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And Wild Weekend was his theme song.
He wrote Wild Weekend.
Yeah. And then it got nationally released and became a huge hit in instrumental, but and it had lyrics about Tom Shannon's show.
Yes, it did. Yes.
CKLW twice.
He worked at CK twice?
Overnights, the bearskin rug.
Right.
And then he came back after Gary Burbank left. Tom Shannon was brought back in to do mornings.
In 76, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you worked. So Jojo, you worked with Tom Shannon, but good.
I want to put in a plug for the recreation of CKLW on big8radio.com. They've got to listen. It's just like the good old days, and we all do voicers and sounders and promos. So big8radio.com.
That's right. And it sounds like CKLW?
Sounds like CKLW.
The jingles and everything?
Yes, and Charlie O'Brien is the guy behind it.
What about 2020 news?
We're working on that. I do traffic, no, and we can't recreate totally, but we are the Facebook page too. CKLW, the Big 8 Facebook page. Everyone goes to it. That's how we got so many people from the CK days too. To really, and the pictures are there from last night. They were up first thing this morning. All thanks to Charlie.
That's great. So it's CKL, thebig8.com.
Thebig8.com, and the radio is big8radio.com.
Perfect, beautiful. Thank you, Jojo. Back to you, Kevin. So you've been in and out of various radio stations. You got to work with one of your heroes.
Yes, I did.
And so you became, since 1980, you've never left. You've been part of Detroit radio.
Yes, I have. Yeah, and what a seriously, I don't mean to be corny, and I'm not. I thank God every day that I was able to come to this market and work in Detroit. It's just, to me, it's a miracle. I'm just so grateful for it.
And you became part of that radio family. Now, earlier, before we went on the air, you did a Casey Kasem impersonation. That is so good. I have to ask you if you could. We air Casey's show on our 70s channel, so everybody gets to hear Casey every week on Sirius XM. But you do a pretty wicked Casey, so if you don't mind.
Well, Lou, I'm here, and I'm back in my hometown, the Motor City. This is where I originally grew up and attended Wayne State University, which is commonly known as the Harvard of the Lodge Freeway. And Lou, I gotta tell you, it's amazing to sit across from a guy who actually remembers the parenthetical title of the B-side of The Martian Hop by the Randells. Forgive me, darling, I have lied.
That's great.
Yeah, keep your feet on the ground.
And a legacy that the 1910 Fruit Gum Company actually wrote a song about Lou. That's right, Simon Says.
Very good.
Beautiful. That's a heck of a. When did you figure out you could do that? Just alone, like in the car one day, you said, "Wait a minute, I really sound like him."
It was funny, Lou, because there was a gentleman named Jim Oakes who was a great voice guy around Detroit, and Jim had been doing Casey on Dick's show. Jim was sick for a couple of weeks and took some vacation time, and I had just started at Q95 doing the midday show and was hanging around with the morning show, and Dick said, "Look, you can do that, can't you?" Well, Dick, I think I can give it a try. So we actually had dueling Caseys for a while.
Yes.
The mother of invention.
Exactly.
And Flash Phelps was part of that too. He can also do Casey, but not that well.
So what are you up to these days?
Well, right now I'm at WJR News Talk 760, and there's a gentleman named Mitch Albom, a very famous author, Tuesdays with Maury, and just a wonderful man, a great philanthropist around town. So many charities.
Is he a Detroit person?
Yes. He's from Philly originally, but he's been in Detroit for years, and he has an afternoon show on WJR from 5 until 7. I'm part of his entourage on the album show, and I write the song parodies that we do, and just have a good time every afternoon, 5 till 7 on WJR.
Love that. So Kevin O'Neill, Ray King, a couple of people who are staying in it and keep cooking, and a couple of original Cleveland guys.
Yes, that's right.
Transplants, expats.
Exactly.
All right. We mentioned where we are. We are in the basement of a guy named Art Vuolo, whose name probably doesn't mean anything to you, the radio listener, but his name certainly means.
Bob Seger knew him.
But Bob Seger knew him from high school. He remembers him from gym class. But he certainly means a lot to people in the business, and he's a pretty remarkable guy. We'll talk with him and the legendary Joey Reynolds when we come back. We take a break. We are in the Diner on Sirius XM, Volume 106 from Detroit, Michigan. Over to Hitsville, and now there's a Motown Museum. So I have to come back to Detroit and really immerse myself in Motown culture a bit. And records like that one, Jimmy Mack, came out of, what was it mostly over there? Studio One? Is that where a lot of the records were made? Studio One? Studio A? Oh, A. Studio A. See? I need to get educated in my Detroit stuff. We're in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm Lou Simon on Sirius XM, Volume 106. Yesterday, a big radio reunion that went on, and a lot of radio legends from this great town all gathered together with their fans, told great stories from behind the scenes, and there was visual presentations, books for sale. It was beautifully put together, and of course behind it, one of the key cogs in the wheel was the person whose home we are in right now. We're in the basement of a guy named Art Vuolo. Art is actually not a Detroit native, really, but he has certainly adopted this town as his own. And his love for radio goes far beyond the Motor City. It is.
I spent the first 4 years of my life in your hometown, Newark, New Jersey.
Really, in Newark.
Born in Brooklyn, Newark, a year in Detroit, 11 years in Indianapolis.
Newark, great radio town, Newark.
Yeah, that's right, WNJR.
Great place to buy one. That's about it.
And I've been in Michigan since '62.
Art, tell us. You're called radio's best friend, and let me just tell you.
Well, that was not. I'm not self-proclaimed. That was given to me.
Whom gave you that moniker?
Scott Shannon.
Scott
Who's
Shannon.
a very famous DJ from New York. He's a very famous radio person who created the zoo format along with Cleveland Wheeler and people like that. So.
He's a radio legend, and he recognized you as the same thing. You've never really spent time on the air because you're not a radio broadcaster.
I used to be on the air. I was on the air in Ann Arbor until they passed the Clean Air Act of 1967. I was actually on the air the night the Detroit riots broke out, and I was pre-taped my show that night. And one of the songs I had the good fortune to play, not knowing they were scheduling the riot, was Barry Maguire. And what was the
Eve of
the
Destruction.
Eve of Destruction? Yes, that was lovely. Yeah, we got calls on that.
I'm sure. But largely, you have spent your career collecting tapes of radio stations and very beautifully exchanging them with people and being very generous.
Yeah, well, in 1977, I met Shotgun Tom Kelly at a what called the R&R convention, Radio and Records in Dallas, Texas, and he had a videotape that he had made from 8mm film of B100, the station he worked at in San Diego, and I went, "Oh my God!" It is a video air check, not just an air check, which is a tape of a station, an audio tape of a station. This was a videotape. We can see the DJs in the studio. You can read the body language. You can see a whole vibe here. And I said, how great. And that started me 40 years ago. In 1979, I did my first video air check. Now, this year marks 40 years that I've been shooting DJs, if you'll excuse the expression. And I want to say hello to my sister, Trish, if she's still listening in the garage where her Sirius XM radio is in her little Honda. And she's out in the far Pacific Northwest. And I just can't get over that you are doing this show from the basement of my house. Of course, it's not just a basement, it's a lower level, and it's a radio archive.
It is a radio archive, though the walls, as I said, are filled with how many? 2-inch tapes, UHF, I'm not UHF, Umatic tapes.
Umatic, 3/4 inch,
3/4
mini
inch,
DV,
VHS, Betamax.
8mm,
8mm,
every
literally
format.
every configuration.
That's right. Yeah.
How many pieces are in your collection? Do you have any idea of the total number of tapes of radio disc jockeys?
People keep saying, are you going to get these all digitally transferred? And I said, if I lived to be 100, I wouldn't have enough time to get that done. So, but here's the nice thing. And my archive is mostly radio stuff and Michigan football. I've been covering Michigan football, University of Michigan football, for 40 years as well. And all of my Michigan football videos are going into the Bentley Library, which is the archive of the University of Michigan, which is a great honor, okay? Because I do it with radio sound. I love radio more than the TV announcer, so we put the radio sound with the football games. Then the other thing, of course, are all the DJ things. Then in 2015, I have the shock of shocks when Craig Kitchen of the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago shocked the wits out of me by saying, we are going to take all of my videos and put them in a permanent display, an exhibit, if you will, at the Radio Hall of Fame, the National Radio Hall of Fame in Chicago, for future generations to see how entertaining radio used to be. Because it just isn't as entertaining as it used to be. That's why I think so many people are flocking to Sirius XM, because you guys are still doing radio on certain channels the way it used to be. Flash Phelps, terrific talent. Pat St. John, everybody, Dave Heffel and everybody, and Shotgun, of course. It's the way it used to be. Fun radio. Got to put the fun back in the radio.
How did you get permission from you? Did you just call a disc jockey, say, I'm coming to Cincinnati, I want to come and videotape you doing your show?
Well, most of the time I didn't even, it was on the spur of the moment. And I've done some wild stuff in Cincinnati, in fact, at WLW Radio.
How many jocks have you made
Oh,
videos
my
of?
God, hundreds. Hundreds and hundreds. I couldn't give you an exact number.
And some of them are not around anymore.
Oh my God! We were showing. There's a thing on the internet. If people want to see a real montage of what I do, simply go on YouTube and type into the search box history of the American DJ, and in 7 minutes and 11 seconds, you will see the most dazzling display of air talent. And sadly, about 40% of them are now gone.
Oh.
And we haven't had a lot of people come along, except for maybe some morning shows. Morning shows seem to be the only place on terrestrial radio where anybody's funny and entertaining.
You never shot me.
No, you had a target on your back, but I never did.
I don't know. I mean, and I feel bad. I'm on the short list of people. There's a convention.
No, I did. We shot the diner, though.
We did shoot
Remember?
the diner.
Back
There's a
in,
convention that you don't know about of people who were never shot by Art Vuolo on video. we get together and we kind of bemoan the fact. I am thrilled by what you do. We talked about Ray keeping Wixie alive. We talk about people who do. You talk about a labor of love. You have a radio studio you built here in your basement with video editing. You do incredible videos. When someone passes away, you know that within hours there's going to be an Art Vuolo video.
I have a lot of tributes to guys. The one I did on Dan Ingram, I'm very proud of. Dan Ingram was one of the biggest. Everyone in the business seems to call Dan Ingram the best DJ ever, top 40 DJ. And I found out from his son Chris down in Florida that I am the only one that ever shot video of him actually on the air at CBS FM back in '92, and I'm very proud of that. So.
I love being around passionate people, no matter what they're passionate about. Even if it's something that I'm not interested in or don't agree with, I just love meeting people who are dedicated to what they do and do it with great fervor. And I have to tell you, and everyone in this room I know agrees, and people all across America who know and love you completely agree. And don't start crying.
I'm not going to cry.
But it is
until I get the bill for all this. Then I'll weep.
No. But it is remarkable to know you, to know that you've chronicled all of us and the best of us and the people who entertained us.
Thank you, Lou.
And how you went around the country, and you didn't care if it was Orangeburg, South Carolina, or New York City. Because there were disc jockeys there who were working hard, and you wanted to show what it looks like to do what we hear.
Everybody wants to see behind the curtain, and I want you to talk to, there was a guy back in '63, I was at the Jersey Shore, and I would play for my cousins. This guy on WKBW, which, by the way, stands for Well-Known Bible Witness.
A witness?
Witness, yes.
I thought it was workers.
No, it's Witness. Well-Known Bible Witness. And that's where Roddy worked, too. Remember, The Price is Right. Come on down.
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, anyhow, he was Joey Reynolds. I said, my God, listen to what this guy can get away with. And we would just sit there. He was the original shock jock before Howard Stern was even thought of. And he's sitting across the table from me, and enough of me, we got to listen, get some stories from Joey.
Joey Reynolds. You talk about legendary. It's hard to come up with a radio station where you didn't work. Tell us a bit about your journey in radio.
I have bad breath, and we're sharing the same mic.
That sums it up.
Let me sit over here.
Come over here.
Let me sit on your lap, Lou.
Yeah, tell us.
Why do we have a red tablecloth here? It looks like an Italian restaurant.
Because it's a diner.
We don't even. Oh, that's why. Oh, the cannolis.
Perfect.
We're not going to do the live remote from San Gennaro again this year. That's where I first met you.
That's right.
Do you know how I met Art? Now this is Art. All right. He lied. Because he's radio's best friend. I'm Art's best friend, and we argue we're like brothers, and oil and water too. But I want to tell you something. I was at WXYZ in Detroit, and I lived on the property, which is Broadcast House. This was years ago, and I was walking down. This is a property that ABC owned with a little I think it was a mini golf course they had there, and a house that we lived in, and a little cafeteria, just to set the stage. And it was a foggy night like in London, and I'm going between buildings, leaving the television radio station to go to my little cottage where I was staying, and this guy jumped from behind a tree with a brownie camera. That was the beginning of his career with the camera.
You wanted a picture of Joey Reynolds?
Yeah, and at that we were kids, this is a little while ago, Lou. And so Art jumped out with that camera, and that's how I met him, and I was his first photograph, and he thought that I was just one of the greatest disc jockeys in the world, and I lost the job, and he followed me wherever I went. I kept getting fired. I had about 40 jobs.
Art says that was 1966.
Yes.
Is that right? So that's
Yeah.
53 years ago.
Well, I had a lot of things.
This prayer is more checkered than
I've been busy.
Oh, Art, you have worked.
No. I have a theory about it. Dick Pert and I was his intern, in Buffalo.
Did not know that.
Well, the trail is from Buffalo to here, with a stop in Cleveland. That's what we all did,
You work at Wixie?
I arrived at the airport here. I said, the sign says, "Welcome to Detroit Terminal," and I said, "It certainly is." So as I arrived here, I was preceded by Tom Clay, who was Jack the Bellboy, by Tommy Shannon, who I was partners with. We owned a recording studio together and had hit records, including Wild Weekend. And then Dick Purton came here. See, this is where you go. You come to Detroit. This is the big time. It's the king of the Great Lakes. I had a couple of things that I wanted to mention. First of all, you're great, and you do a wonderful job. And this is a great thing to do, because yesterday with the gathering, we did something that many people have forgotten how to do, and that is to form a community. And today, when we were over at Mike Seltzer's house, even his wife said to me, "Boy, you guys are. It's a pleasure to serve all of you, because there's a community. You gathered this community too. You did this with us in January.
Yeah, when you stopped by the studio. Yeah.
Yeah, but look at what happened. Yesterday, what we did? We did something that very rarely happens on television and radio anymore. We entertained people. They had a blast yesterday.
They did. Everybody had fun. I did. And I was hearing people talk about radio stations that I never heard in my life. But hearing the people getting up there telling these tales and sharing, it made me feel like by the time I left, I bought 2 books. I swear, I did. And I said to Shotgun Tom, thank you so much for inviting me and letting me know about this, and having Art invite me. It's a pleasure talking to you, Joey. We have a hard out. You know what that means? Yeah. Well, but I just want, it's not vulgar. But I just want to say, let's give a round of applause to Art Vuolo, folks.
Yeah.
He worked so hard. He worked so hard in keeping all of this alive. It's amazing what he has collected, this beautiful museum of our history of this town and everyone who ever cracked a mic. He makes me proud to be in radio. Folks, I always say the next best thing listening to music is talking about it tonight. The next best thing listening to radio is talking about it. Thank you from Detroit, Michigan, Lou Simon. Thanking you so much for joining us this evening. And next week, interviews with Lou Christie and Peter Asher in the diner.